Pay attention to the woman in the red dress standing near the champagne fountain. Her name is Rebecca Torres, 34 years old, a pediatric nurse from Queens who volunteered at children's hospitals on weekends and dreamed of opening a medical clinic for underserved communities. The man she's speaking to, tall, silver-haired, wearing an expensive suit, is Malcolm Devine, 47, owner of the Orgy Haven Club in Manhattan's meatpacking district. Within 30 minutes of this security footage timestamp, 11:47 p.m. on March 15, 2024, Rebecca would make a confession to her husband that would trigger a violent confrontation, a police raid, and the unraveling of the most sophisticated blackmail operation the NYPD had seen in a decade. What appears to be a woman at a private party was actually the final stage of a trap that had been closing around her marriage for 6 months. Rebecca Torres met James Torres in 2019 at a veterans charity event in Brooklyn. He was a master sergeant in the United States Army, 38 years old, decorated for service in 2 deployments overseas. They married within a year, a small ceremony at a church in Astoria attended by family and his military brothers. James was everything Rebecca wanted: disciplined, protective, devoted. They bought a modest 2-bedroom apartment on Junction Boulevard. Rebecca worked 12-hour shifts at Mount Sinai Hospital. James worked logistics at Fort Hamilton when he wasn't deployed. Their life was structured, predictable, and secure. They had routines. Sunday dinners with James's mother in the Bronx. Friday movie nights at home. They talked about children. Rebecca kept a notebook with potential names. The vulnerability in their marriage wasn't infidelity or mistrust. It was distance. James deployed for 8-month rotations. Rebecca spent those months alone, working, waiting, filling the silence with work and exhaustion. She was responsible. She was faithful. But she was lonely in ways she couldn't articulate, even to herself. In September 2023, during James's latest deployment to Poland, Rebecca joined an online support group for military spouses. The group was called Devoted Hearts, a private Facebook community with over 2,000 members. The description promised connection, understanding, and resources for partners navigating the isolation of military life. Rebecca's first post was simple: how do you stop feeling guilty for feeling lonely? Within an hour, she received 43 comments. One of them was from a woman named Elena Castellano. Elena Castellano's profile showed a smiling brunette in her late 30s, photographed at what appeared to be a military ball. Her bio stated she was married to a Navy officer, had 2 children, and lived in Connecticut. Her posts in Devoted Hearts were thoughtful, empathetic, and articulate. She shared book recommendations. She organized virtual coffee meetups. She sent private messages checking in on members who seemed particularly isolated. Elena Castellano did not exist. The profile was a fabrication, brick by digital brick, designed by Malcolm Devine. Elena began messaging Rebecca privately in late September. Their conversations were innocent at first, discussions about managing household responsibilities alone, dealing with family questions, navigating the fear that came with every news alert about overseas incidents. Elena was patient. She built trust through consistency. She remembered details Rebecca mentioned. She asked follow-up questions. By October, they were messaging daily. In early November, Elena introduced a new topic: the unfairness of sacrifice. She shared her own story, how she'd given up career opportunities, how her husband's absences had created emotional distance, how she sometimes felt more like a logistical support system than a wife. Rebecca recognized her own feelings in Elena's words. The conversations shifted from support to validation of frustration. Elena never suggested infidelity directly. She simply normalized the idea that military spouses deserved more attention, more appreciation, more autonomy over their own happiness. On November 18, 2023, Elena mentioned a private event she attended occasionally in Manhattan, a lifestyle club for professionals seeking connection without judgment. She described it as sophisticated, discreet, and therapeutic. She said it helped her feel desired again, reminded her she was more than a waiting wife. She said the club vetted all members carefully. She said it was a place where people could explore aspects of themselves they'd suppressed. She never pressured Rebecca to attend. She simply mentioned it existed. Rebecca researched Orgy Haven on her own. The club's website was elegant. Minimalist design, testimonials from members describing empowerment and liberation, photographs of upscale interiors that looked more like art galleries than the seedy venues she'd imagined. The membership application required references, background checks, and a video interview. Rebecca told herself she was just curious. She told herself she'd never actually go. On December 3, 2023, while James was 7,000 miles away, coordinating supply routes in Eastern Europe, Rebecca attended her first event at Orgy Haven. The club occupied the top floor of a renovated warehouse on West 14th Street. Members entered through a private elevator that required a key card. Inside, the space was divided into social lounges, private rooms, and themed areas. The dress code was strict: elegant evening wear or designated theme attire. Alcohol was served. Music played at conversation level. Malcolm Devine greeted every new member personally. He was charming, reassuring, and professional. He explained the club's rules. Consent was absolute, discretion was mandatory, and members could participate at whatever level they chose. Some came only to socialize. Others explored further. Rebecca stayed in the social lounge that first night. She drank champagne. She talked with other members, lawyers, executives, a professor from Columbia. Everyone seemed normal, successful, and articulate. She left at midnight feeling strangely exhilarated. She returned on December 17th, then January 7th, 2024, then January 21st. Each visit pushed boundaries slightly further. She met a man named David who claimed to be a venture capitalist. They kissed in one of the private lounges. She felt desired in ways she hadn't in months. She felt seen. The club became her secret, her escape, her rebellion against the loneliness that had been suffocating her since September. What Rebecca didn't know was that every room in Orgy Haven was equipped with hidden cameras. High-definition footage captured from multiple angles. Audio recording devices embedded in decorative fixtures. Malcolm Devine had built his business on two revenue streams: membership fees and blackmail. The club attracted professionals with reputations to protect: married individuals, public figures, people with security clearances. Devine archived everything. He built dossiers. He waited. James Torres returned from deployment on February 23, 2024. Rebecca picked him up from Fort Hamilton in their Honda Accord. They had dinner at the Italian restaurant where they'd had their first date. That night, lying in bed, James told Rebecca he loved her. She said she loved him too. She did, but the guilt was already eating through her from the inside. Rebecca stopped going to Orgy Haven after James returned. She deleted the club's app from her phone. She blocked Elena Castellano on Facebook. She told herself it was finished, that it had been a temporary lapse born from isolation, that she could rebuild her marriage without James ever knowing. She was wrong. On March 8, 2024, Rebecca received an email from an address she didn't recognize: divineinvestments@protonmail.com. The subject line read, "Regarding your membership." The email was brief. It included 3 video files. The files showed Rebecca at Orgy Haven on 3 separate dates. The footage was explicit. The email's final line read, "Your husband's commanding officer at Fort Hamilton would find these materials concerning. We should discuss your continued membership." Rebecca vomited in her office bathroom at Mount Sinai. She called the email address. A man answered. Malcolm Devine. His voice was calm, almost sympathetic. He explained that the club required lifetime membership fees for certain individuals whose attendance had been particularly memorable. The fee was $50,000. If she couldn't pay, alternative arrangements could be made. Perhaps she could encourage friends to join. Perhaps she could return for documented visits with specific members Devine would select. Or, he suggested, she could simply explain everything to her husband herself. He gave her 1 week to decide. Rebecca Torres made her decision on March 14, 2024. She couldn't pay $50,000. She couldn't continue visiting the club under Devine's control. She couldn't live with the secret consuming her. She decided to tell James everything. Not because Devine forced her, but because the guilt had become unbearable. She planned to tell him at home, privately, but panic overtook her. On March 15th, Devine sent another email. Final event tonight. You're invited as a guest of honor. Last chance to reconsider our arrangement. The email included an address. Rebecca, spiraling and irrational, decided to confront Devine in person. She would tell him she was going to the police. She would tell him she'd already informed her husband. She would call his bluff. She arrived at Orgy Haven at 10:30 p.m. She wore a red dress because the dress code required formal attire, and it was the only thing in her closet that qualified. She found Devine near the champagne fountain, surrounded by other members. Security cameras captured her approaching him. Captured their conversation, her voice rising, his remaining level. Captured him gesturing toward a private office. At 11:15 p.m., James Torres received a text message from an unknown number. The message contained a photograph. Rebecca in the red dress, standing in Orgy Haven's main lounge. The message read, "Your wife is here right now. West 14th Street, top floor. Thought you should know." James Torres drove from Junction Boulevard to Manhattan in 23 minutes. He arrived at the building at 11:38 p.m. The private elevator required a key card he didn't have. He forced the ground floor door. He climbed 8 flights of stairs. He burst through the service entrance into Orgy Haven's main space at 11:47 p.m., the exact timestamp on the security footage showing Rebecca near the champagne fountain. What happened next was captured on multiple cameras from different angles. James Torres entered the club shouting his wife's name. Rebecca turned. Her face showed shock, then horror, then resignation. James crossed the space in seconds. Members scattered. Devine moved to intercept, but James pushed past him. Security guards approached, but hesitated. James Torres was 6 feet 2 inches of military training and rage. Rebecca started crying before James reached her. She said his name once. Then she said the words that would be entered into police records 30 minutes later. "I slept with my ex last night." She didn't. She hadn't seen her ex-boyfriend in 8 years. The statement made no sense, born from panic and confusion, and the complete psychological collapse happening in real time. What she meant to say was, "I've been coming here." What came out was a false confession to something she hadn't done, overshadowing the things she had. James Torres stopped walking. His face went blank. Rebecca continued talking, words tumbling out incoherently. "Why don't you want me anymore? Why am I always alone? Why do you leave me?" James turned to leave. Rebecca grabbed his arm. He pulled away. Malcolm Devine, seeing his blackmail scheme imploding into a public domestic incident, tried to escort James toward the exit. James shoved him backward into a table. Security footage shows what happened next. One of Devine's security guards moved to physically restrain James. James, operating on combat instincts, responded with force. The guard went down. A second guard moved in. James put him down too. Club members were now fleeing toward the exits. Someone screamed. Devine pulled out his phone. Whether to call police or delete files, investigators would never determine. James grabbed the phone and threw it across the room. Rebecca was screaming now. James looked at her one final time, and the footage captures the exact moment something broke in his expression. He walked to the service entrance and disappeared down the stairs. Rebecca collapsed onto the floor. Devine was shouting at his guards to seal the exits. Club members were calling 911. NYPD officers from the 10th Precinct arrived at Orgy Haven at 12:04 a.m. on March 16, 2024. They found approximately 40 people in various states of distress, 2 injured security guards, and Malcolm Devine demanding the arrest of an intruder who'd assaulted his staff. Rebecca Torres was still sitting on the floor near the champagne fountain, unresponsive. Officers separated witnesses and began taking statements. The official reports described a domestic disturbance that escalated into assault. Officers noted the location was a private social club without elaborating. They noted Rebecca Torres appeared emotionally distressed but was not physically injured. They noted James Torres had left the scene before police arrival. An APB was issued for his vehicle. Officers prepared to file assault charges. Then Detective Angela Reyes from the Special Victims Unit arrived. Reyes had been investigating reports of sexual coercion linked to Manhattan social clubs for 8 months. A victim had mentioned Orgy Haven in a previous interview but refused to provide details. Reyes had flagged the location. When the domestic disturbance call came through showing that address, Reyes responded. What Reyes found was an operation far larger than a domestic dispute. While interviewing Rebecca Torres at the scene, Rebecca, exhausted and destroyed, mentioned the blackmail emails. She showed Reyes her phone. Reyes immediately contacted the NYPD's Computer Crimes Squad. Within 2 hours, investigators had secured a warrant to search Orgy Haven's premises. What they found was devastating. Malcolm Devine maintained a server room behind a false wall in his office. The servers contained terabytes of video footage, thousands of hours documenting hundreds of members over a 3-year period. Each member had a dedicated folder. Rebecca Torres's folder contained footage from her 4 visits. James Torres's commanding officer's name was listed in a document titled Leverage Points. The server also contained evidence of 23 active blackmail schemes targeting members with military clearances, government positions, and corporate leadership roles. The investigation expanded immediately. FBI agents joined NYPD detectives due to the national security implications. Multiple active-duty military personnel were being blackmailed, potentially compromising classified information. Agents began contacting victims identified in Devine's files. Most initially denied any association with Orgy Haven. When shown the evidence, several broke down. One victim, a Department of Defense contractor with top-secret clearance, had paid Devine over $200,000 over 18 months. Another, a federal prosecutor, had provided Devine with confidential information about ongoing investigations. The fake profile Elena Castellano was traced to an IP address registered to a woman named Patricia Morrison, 51, who lived in Jersey City and worked as a freelance writer. Morrison had been hired through a dark web forum to create and maintain multiple fake profiles targeting military spouses. She was paid $3,000 per month. She didn't know what the profiles were used for. She claimed she thought it was market research. She was arrested on March 18, 2024. Investigators identified 16 other military spouses who'd been contacted by Elena Castellano or similar fake profiles. 8 had attended Orgy Haven. All had been blackmailed. The operation had been running since January 2021, generating an estimated $1.4 million through blackmail payments and compromised information. Devine had operated with complete impunity, protected by his victims' shame and fear. Malcolm Devine was arrested on March 19, 2024, at his home in Hoboken, New Jersey, where he lived with his wife of 20 years and 2 teenage children. His wife told investigators he was a real estate investor. She had no knowledge of Orgy Haven. Devine's computer at home contained additional files, blackmail scripts, victim psychological profiles, and communications with other operators running similar schemes in Los Angeles and Miami. James Torres was located on March 17, 2024, at his mother's apartment in the Bronx. He was arrested for assault, but released pending trial after military attorneys intervened and prosecutors reviewed the circumstances. The assault charges were ultimately dropped after Devine's arrest. Prosecutors determined James had been acting in response to extreme emotional disturbance caused by Devine's criminal scheme. James filed for divorce on March 25, 2024. Rebecca Torres resigned from Mount Sinai Hospital on March 20th. She moved out of the Junction Boulevard apartment. Her attorney negotiated immunity from prosecution in exchange for her testimony against Devine. She entered therapy. She sent James one letter which he returned unopened. In later interviews with investigators, Rebecca described the 6 months leading to that night as living inside someone else's choices, a psychological manipulation she didn't recognize until it was too late. Malcolm Devine was charged with 23 counts of extortion, 47 counts of illegal surveillance, and multiple charges related to coercion and fraud. Patricia Morrison received 2 years in federal prison for wire fraud. Devine's trial began in September 2024. He was convicted on all counts in November 2024 and sentenced to 32 years in federal prison. His assets, including the building housing Orgy Haven, his home, and his investment accounts, were seized to provide restitution to victims. The investigation revealed that Divine's scheme had affected 73 individuals directly and countless families. Marriages ended. Careers were destroyed. 2 victims died by suicide before Divine's arrest. The FBI's investigation into similar operations in other cities remains ongoing. James Torres remains on active duty with the United States Army. He was promoted to Sergeant Major in August 2024. He has not remarried. Rebecca Torres moved to California, where she works at a community health clinic. They have not spoken since March 15, 2024. The building that housed Orgy Haven has been sold. The space is now occupied by a tech startup. The champagne fountain was removed. The hidden cameras were destroyed as evidence was processed. But the security footage from that night, Rebecca in her red dress, James bursting through the door, the moment everything shattered, remains in federal evidence files, a permanent record of how methodically one man's cruelty can dismantle lives he never personally met. Pay attention to the woman in the red dress. She was not a villain. She was a victim of an operation designed to exploit the very loneliness that military families sacrifice everything to endure. Malcolm Divine understood that isolation creates vulnerability, and he built an empire on that understanding. 32 years in prison is what justice looks like. But for the 73 victims and their families, the sentence is life.